Assalamu alaikum. This is lecture 8 of web design and development, and in this lecture we are going to continue our discussion about hypertext markup language. Lecture contents are similar to the previous lecture. HTML tables display information in rows and columns, much similar to the other tables. Tables are commonly used to display all manners of data. Even in the past, page structure was also used by tables. So this data fits in a grid such as schedules, television listing or financial reports, etc. Tables uh, in the HTML pages are created by the tag known as table, and it ends with the slash table. In each of the table there are rows and there are values. Table rows are presented or specified with tr, and in each table row there can be table data known as table values. So you can specify a table row and then you can specify the values in each table row, that will be the column or cell in each row. Table can be divided into multiple parts such as table header, table body, table footer. The table header is marked with TH, and there can be number of rows in the table header. For example, you can specify one row in the table header and you specify the values using the TH. So these values will have different styles than the rest of the table. Similarly, when you have defined the table header, you can move to define the table body, and this type of tags can be defined in tBody tag. In tBody, you can have multiple rows defined as tr, and you can have multiple table data in each of the table row. Similarly, some information can also be divided and displayed in table footer, which is named as tfoot, and you can specify one or more rows in the tfooter as well. Table summary is specified by the summary, and if you have any conclusive information or you want to summarize some data, you can use in the summary tag of your table. The caption of table provides information about the data contained in the table. So you can specify caption in a table tag using the caption tag. Spanning specifies the number of rows or columns a single cell can take place. This is a simple example to display a table which contains 3 columns and 2 rows. So you can see the HTML code presented here. You started with a table tag and you specified some height and width properties, and the first row states specified by the tr states the name, which is a table header, and subjects and marks. So this has a different style than the rest of the table. So you can specify the next row, etc., and so on. So this slide shows the row level attributes. For example, you have the same table like the previous one. You have the table header with the name, subject, and marks, and you move to the next row. You have the specified the height. That means this row is larger than the previous row, and you specify the 3 values, and you specify the name, you specify the subject, and you specify the marks. There are cell level attributes. For example, if you observe this value, it is based on 2 rows, so that is controlled by the row span attribute. So you have specified the first attribute td with a row span of 2, and it is name, and then you specified the next attribute subject, which is actually consists of two columns. So you have specified the call span attribute to 2. Then there are simple values as table values, table data, OOP, DB, and then you have this roll number, sorry, name of the student, and then you have the marks. Here is an example of caption. It will be displayed on the top of the table. That is the table of student results. Another fundamental element of web pages is HTML forms. Forms provide a means for submitting information from the client to the server, and it is used by the form tag. Common form attributes are action, method, and a name. Action gives the URL of the application that is to receive and process the form data. That means you input the data and then you send it to a URL specified by the action attribute of your form. Then there is a method that what you want to do with the data. It sets the HTTP method that the browser uses to send the form data to the server for processing. This can be done by post, get, or some other method which we will discuss in the next slide. The name of the form specifies the name to identify the form. Here are some typical form elements known as you can specify the text boxes, password fields, hidden fields, checkboxes, etc. Text boxes are very simple. You have seen them in many of applications where you specify the text. Password fields actually hides the text values, and these are represented by dots or asterisks. Hidden fields are used to contain some identification values or some input fields that you do not want to display to the user. Checkboxes show the list of items. Similarly, radio boxes show the list of items, and you can choose one from the radio buttons and you can choose multiple from the checkboxes. Text area is a large text box which is usually used by application to get a large amount of textual information such as summary, description, problem, or some address fields, etc. Select list is similar to the checkboxes. That means you can select one or multiple items from a list. Then there are two common buttons, submit button and reset button. Submit button submits the data to the server, and resets actually clears the field. So here are some examples done. For example, you have an input and it is type of text. You specify the name, you specify the value, and you specify the maximum length of the text. You can specify the select button using it is actually a drop down, and you can use the select, and you can specify the name, and you can specify the options such as you have listed the list of cities to choose from. Submitting is done by the submit button, and reset is done by the reset button. So these are also input elements, and they have the type of submit and reset. Checkboxes have different values such as checked. If you have specified the checked value, your checkbox will be checked by default. There are some other field attributes such as required. If you use the required field, you cannot submit the form unless you have required the value for that field. Placeholder field attribute specifies a textual information that is already written in a text box to show the information about a text box. And whenever you start writing in a text box, the placeholder information vanishes. Pattern specifies a regular expression that how you want to actually input your text field. Disabled values are not cannot be used by the user, and the read-only attributes are only readable. You cannot actually edit or perform any operations. Autocomplete is a property that uses a data list to actually complete the value of your input field. And there are some other tags such as email, number, date, color, etc. So if you look at the pattern regular expression, there are certain ways that you can make the pattern of your input of any input field. So simply square brackets make a class of characters, and if you specify the hyphen with the some characters, you can use a range of characters. For example, if you use A to Z, A hyphen Z or 0 hyphen 9, you can specify value in the text box either alphanumerically or just alphabetically or numerically if you use either one of these. So not specifies the negation of your class character. So if you use similar pattern and specify with the not operator, that means you cannot use 0 to 9 letters, numbers, and you can use anything else. So if along with these numbers, if you specify a number that matches a character, class or subclass pattern for n times. So if you specify two numbers, so it matches a character, class or subpattern for minimum n times and maximum m times. Here is an example of this. If you have specified the pattern A to Z small letters, A to Z capital letters, that means you can use only alphabets in your text field, and you have specified the length 1 to 20. A similar input is displayed in the second example. You have the same pattern, you have the same length, but in this case you have specified the space value as well. So we discussed the data list in the last slide. So data list item or element is a text field with a set of predefined autocomplete options. First we define an input field with the list attribute, then we define the data list items. So it is specified by the input type text, and we have list of colors. So we have a data list item with the ID of colors, and we have two colors which are named for this case mistakenly. Both are red, however we can specify different options. So whenever you start typing in autocomplete text box, you start with the first letter. The autocomplete will provide you an option with the complete list of options, and you can choose any one of those to fill in the field. Another HTML attributes are email attributes, and you can specify the input type email, and only emails will be entered in your text element. Similarly, if you want to specify the date, you can use the date input type, and you can use the number input type for only specifying the number. And if you want to pick the color, you can use the type color, and if you want to upload the file, you can use the type of file input element. Web forms use these HTML elements and attributes, and requests can contain the information displayed is as follows. The web form actually display a list of items, and you fill those items and you send the information to the server. This information sending is known as requesting it to the server, as discussed in the lecture 1. So how the mechanism was described in the lecture 1, that you send the request to the server and server generates the response back to the requester. So whenever you want to generate request to the server, you have to create a web form, and it should point to a URL accessible on the web server. So URL is an action that is the address of the website of the resource. So what you want to do with that resource is specified by the method. Method is a HTTP method, and there are certain methods such as get, post, head, put, delete, etc. Each has a different purpose, which we are going to discuss in the next slide. So received element specifies that the number of bytes received from the server, and the time specifies the time taken to process the request. The web forms have different methods. These are called HTTP methods, and are some verb keywords which correspond to the request being sent to the server. There are many request methods, however, some of the commonly used are listed below. The one is the get method. That means you want to get something from the server. Get request is to get resource from the web server. The resource can be of any type of the file or a web page or any other information. Head method is a very similar to the get method. However, in the head method, the server does not return a response message. Post method, in post method, data is posted to the web server to perform some operation on it. Put method sends the data to the web server to add new data on the web server. Similarly, delete is used to delete a resource from the web server. So if you want to get only the information, you will use the get method. If you want to get information with no message from the server, you can use the head method. And if you want to send data to the server, such as if you want to add new data, you can use the post method, and this will also generate a response. And if you want to only append the data to the server, you can use the put method. And if you want to delete data from the server, you can use the delete method of your web form. So this actually concludes the discussion of HTML. The rest is up to you that how much you practice and experiment with the HTML. So you can use any online medium to actually get the more information about the HTML tags and how they can be used. There is nothing much to discuss more about the HTML, and if you want to learn more about the HTML, you can read any of the book of the HTML, and it should not take you more than 1 day to get yourself expert in the HTML. Thank you very much. You can ask me using any of the designated medium, or you can conduct a question and answer session.